Chapter 141, Becoming Famous with One Treatment 7. Since you claim that Lin Gongong avoided his castration, then I will castrate him for you. Young Luo Feng bewitchingly smiled, the long sword in her hand suddenly left her hand and sliced off the organ on his crotch with a plop. Because her eyes were still covered by Yun Xiao, this strike completely relied on her senses. Ah! A heart-wrenching scream pierced the air, causing everyone's hair to stand on its end. Eunuch Lin directly fainted from the pain, fresh blood still gushing from his lower body, painting the floor red. The young girl's cruel and decisive tactics made all the ministers inwardly shiver. It was unexpected that she would castrate Eunuch Lin in front of everyone. Yun Luo Feng. Gao Tu was completely infuriated. He abruptly stood up and harshly said, "What are you doing?" As though not feeling Gao Tu's rage, Yun Luo Feng nonchalantly said, "Elder Rong, please prepare another bowl of medicinal soup and force-feed it to him. This time, I have castrated Lin Gongong in front of everyone, so certain people can't find an excuse anymore." Elder Rong gradually recovered from his shock and guffawed, "Girl, I still have some leftover medicine, I will bring it over for you now." This girl was brutal and decisive, never soft-hearted towards her enemies. Her future achievements could not be estimated. As soon as he finished speaking, he dashed out of the main hall and quickly disappeared under the intense sun. A while later, carrying a bowl of medicinal soup, Elder Rong entered the main hall with big strides and stepped in front of Eunuch Lin without saying a word. His fingers tightly clutched the eunuch's chin and forcefully poured the soup into his mouth. Cough, cough. The eunuch coughed from choking and slowly woke up. At the same time, Yun Luo Feng's fist ruthlessly landed on his body once again, and a mouthful of fresh blood spurted out. His already pale face became more deathly pale. After experiencing this torment, Eunuch Lin appeared as though he was several decades older, and his eyes were unfocused. Every minister's eyes were intensely and unblinkingly staring at Eunuch Lin, afraid that they would miss anything. Even Mu Wuxuang disregarded gender differences and kept her eyes on Eunuch Lin's crotch. Under everyone's gaze, Eunuch Lin's bloody crotch gradually started growing a sharp end, similar to a budding bean sprout. The entire hall quieted following his body's changes. It was so silent that a needle dropping onto the floor could be heard. Bang! Gao Tu's body heavily landed on his imperial throne, and he stared at Eunuch Lin, who was still in a daze, with an ashen expression. Thinking back on the words that he just spoke, how laughable were they? Impossible, this definitely can't be real. Mu Xingqiu was the first to react, his body shuddered several times, and he staggered back with eyes full of disbelief, staring intently at Eunuch Lin. A eunuch transforming into a man. He had never heard of something like this. If it weren't for Yun Luo Feng castrating Eunuch Lin in front of them, perhaps they would be the same as Gao Tu and believe that Eunuch Lin avoided his castration instead of attributing it to a dose of medicine. That instant, all the ministers in the main hall turned their sight to Yun Luo Feng with a fervent gleam in their eyes. How outstanding would her medical skills have to be in order to turn a eunuch into a man? Let's not bother mentioning Mu Wuxuang, even her master did not possess a formidable ability like this. It was ridiculous that Mu Wuxuang previously used a lecturing tone to converse with Yun Luo Feng. Chapter 142, Disgracing Oneself 1. Your Majesty, my granddaughter is the winner of this bet. Shouldn't you make the Prime Minister estate fulfill their promise now? Yun Luo's features were full of pleasure as he radiantly asked with a clear voice. At this moment, Gao Tu's expression was quite flustered, and his body was slumped on the imperial throne. His sight gradually moved to Mu Xingqiu and his granddaughter and said dispiritedly, "Prime Minister Mu, tomorrow, you will personally head to the graves of Yun Luo Feng's parents and kneel down in front of it to apologize to them. You will also write a letter of confession to post on the city wall for the public." Mu Xingqiu's complexion was ashen, and when he lowered his head, malice flashed through his eyes. This minister shall obey. At a time like this, Gao Tu could not blatantly favor him, so he could only keep a low profile. However, he would remember this debt. He would eventually pay it back to Yun Luo Feng, this stinky girl. Jen is tired. You are all dismissed. Gao Tu wearily closed his eyes with a heart full of bitterness. No matter what, he would have never imagined that Yun Luo Feng really was a physician and even possessed an excellent medical skill. If he knew, he should not have blatantly sided with the Prime Minister estate, leading him to offend a genius doctor like that. At this moment, Gao Tu finally understood the meaning of Elder Rong's words. Compared to Yun Luo Feng, Mu Wuxuang truly was not worth much. Elder Ning, Yun Luo Feng raised her brow and turned to face Elder Ning with a wicked smile on her lips. Hand over the results from your investigation of these previous years to Prime Minister Estate, so that they can write a letter of confession according to those results. I don't want a single detail left out. 6 months ago, when she had Elder Ning help her look into all of the crimes related to the Prime Minister Estate, it was all for today. She would make the people from the Prime Minister Estate admit everything that they had done in front of everyone. Also, Yun Luo Feng's smile remained unchanged and became more bewitching. Prime Minister Estate posting the letter of confession to the city wall alone is not enough. I want to make them announce every crime in the letter of confession in front of Longyuan's citizens. Yun Luo Feng. Mu Xingqiu angrily clenched his fists, rage nearly erupting from his chest. Don't go too far. Could it be that your Prime Minister Estate can bet but can't lose? Yun Luo Feng sent a sidelong glance at the ashen Mu Xingqiu. Since it's like that, Yun Xiao, tie these people up, bring them to the city gate tomorrow, and force them to announce their crimes. If they are too unwilling to open their mouths, beat them up. Beat them until they are willing to speak. Yun Luo Feng, you've got quite the nerves. I am an important minister of the court. What qualifications do you have to tie me up? Mu Xingqiu's eyes were saturated with an intense killing intent as he harshly asked. Yun Luo Feng bewitchingly smiled. So what if you are an important minister of the court? I have never needed to fear anyone when I act. If you don't believe it, you can try. Mu Xingqiu tightly clenched his fist. He was shaking from anger, his eyes were spitting fire as they fiercely glared at the girl's languid and bewitching posture. The killing intent in his eyes became more and more intense. He should have killed this little BTCH before Yun Luo returned to court. But how could he have known that a trash he had never taken notice of would actually be able to cause so much trouble? Mu Xingqiu, I wouldn't have thought that an old thief like you is not only shameless but also untrustworthy. Yun Luo burst into laughter, clearly overjoyed. However, since you have already made a promise, you must adhere to it. If you aren't willing to fulfill it, I don't mind using some stronger means. Chapter 143, Disgracing Oneself 2. Mu Xingqiu was so angry that he became speechless and subconsciously looked at Gao Tu. Upon seeing that Gao Tu had his eyes closed the entire time and did not pay attention to their dispute, his heart fell into despair little by little. Yun Luo Feng, Mu Wuxuang suppressed the envy bursting from her heart and coldly gazed at Yun Luo Feng, hate flashing through her beautiful eyes. I, Mu Wuxuang, am willing to admit my loss. I promise you that I will head to the city gate tomorrow. Except, I hope you won't regret today's events. In Longyuan, if she did not have the protection of the imperial family, she was no match for the Yun family. The reason was none other than the fact that the Yun family had an insurmountable presence like Yun Luo. As long as Yun Luo did not die, she had no way of destroying Yun Luo Feng, that BTCH. Whenever Mu Wuxuang thought of Yun Luo Feng's medical skill, it was as though claws were mercilessly scratching her heart, making her feel extremely agonized. If she didn't eliminate her, she would not feel at ease in her entire life. Great, I will wait for your arrival at the city gate tomorrow. After speaking these words, Yun Luo Feng lazily stretched and moved around her shoulders as the corner of her lips bewitchingly raised. Yun Xiao, let's go home. After saying this, she slowly turned around and headed out of the main hall. The rays of the setting sun fell onto the girl's snow-white robes, suffocating in its beauty. Yun Xiao was akin to a loyal guard, following and standing beside Yun Luo Feng all along. The man's face was always without a single expression and was cold, as though nothing could move him. Ho ho, Elder Ning chuckled and meaningfully watched the two youngsters' departing figures as he pointedly stated, I'm quite curious where Uniato got the luck to pick up a man like this. General Yun, your Yun family is very blessed this time, haha. After loudly laughing twice, he headed out the main hall, only leaving behind a confused Yun Luo. Ever since the main hall's events spread around, Yun Luo Feng's reputation was suddenly known all throughout Longyuan Kingdom. It could be described with 5 words, becoming famous with one treatment. All the people who once mocked and ridiculed her immediately changed their attitude, itching to kneel and lick her boots. So what if Yun Luo Feng could not cultivate? She was a godly doctor. With the existence of her godly doctor reputation, there were numerous strong people who wished to escort her. She could basically travel unhindered on the continent. Although Yun Luofeng rescued Elder Ning by Qin River that day, there were still many people who held a skeptical attitude. However, now that there were so many major ministers from the palace heading to General Yun's estate to vie for her favor, the excitement that Yun Luofeng brought them could be imagined. At this time, outside the city gate of the imperial city, Mu Xingqiu and Mu Wuxuang from the prime minister estate both stood at the gate in a sorry state with an incredibly embarrassed expression. A group of guards stood behind them like an unmovable mountain, not allowing them any room for escape, so the duo can only accept everyone's stunned or shocked gaze. Everyone, Yun Luofeng swept her eyes across the awkwardly standing pair before turning to the people standing in a circle and watching, and her peerlessly beautiful face was haughty and cold. I'm sure you all know about the events that happened to our general estate 10 years ago. 10 years ago. Hearing this sensitive number, the mass whispered into each other's ears, their astonished eyes casting glances at Mu Xingqiu and his granddaughter every now and then. 10 years ago, my parents led an army to war, but because Prime Minister Mu Xingqiu was lascivious and fell into the enemy army's evil plan, causing intelligence to be leaked and my parents to die on the battlefield. A deep pain appeared on Yun Luofeng's features, and her voice also became harsher. However, Mu Xingqiu, this old thief, did not demonstrate any repentance in spite of everything. Not only did he refuse to admit his wrong, he even deemed that my parents must have deserved it for doing something wicked. Chapter 144, Disgracing Oneself 3. The girl's voice was so potent that Mu Xingqiu almost lowered his head to the dust. The events from 10 years ago were actually known by the people of Longyuan Kingdom. It was just because Prime Minister Mu was so influential that nobody dared to speak for the victims. What do you mean when you say that they deserve it because they had committed too many evil deeds? Yun Luofeng laughed, full of contempt. Her laughter rang once again at the gate of the city. All I know is that nice people don't live long while the wicked ones survive for millenniums. My parents were framed by petty men. They got murdered by an old thief, Mu Xingqiu. Still, he was totally unrepentant after murdering them. So today, I'm here to make Mu Xingqiu confess all the evil deeds that he has done over the years to vent out the anger of my parents. Good. Someone in the crowd took the lead to applaud and the others followed. At this moment, all the people on the scene burnt with rage. Junior General Yun was young and talented, and his wife was also valiant. They are both heroes in our minds. I don't believe such heroes would be killed on the battlefield for committing evil deeds. They were murdered by Mu Xingqiu as they tried to defend our country. Yes, so many young talents have died on the battlefield. Were all of them killed for doing evil deeds? One of my uncles died in the battlefield, and he has always been a nice man. I don't believe that God will really punish the bad guys. If God had eyes, there wouldn't be so many wars. Looking at these angry people, Yun Luofeng slightly raised the corner of her mouth. She recognized the first guy who applauded. He was a shop assistant of Medical Pavilion. It was a no-brainer that Elder Rong sent this guy here. Miss Yun, they should kneel down before the grave of Junior General Yun and apologize to him. Exactly, they must apologize. If they don't apologize, they should pay Junior General Yun and his wife with their life. The reaction of the people was very intense. At this moment, they threw all of their scruples away, and some people even spat at Mu Xingqiu, who was utterly embarrassed. Of course, Yun Luofeng understood that these people dared to stand up because they saw how discomfited Mu Xingqiu was. If they were faced with that high-spirited Prime Minister Mu, they would not dare to utter a single word. You can rest assured. Yun Luofeng raised her hand to put a stop to all the angry voices. I made them come here because the medical pavilion had discovered all the evil deeds that the Mu family had done over the years. After this matter here is settled, I will make them go to my parents' graves and apologize to them. Actually, these things were discovered by Elder Ning, but the citizens did not know who Elder Ning was, so Yun Luofeng had to mention the medical pavilion. With the reputation of medical pavilion, nobody would doubt the authenticity of her accusation. Mu Xingqiu looked pale. Just now, someone spat at him when he did not pay attention. The saliva smelled so disgusting that he almost threw up. Mu Xingqiu, Yun Luofeng turned to Mu Xingqiu. Show me your letter of confession. Confess all the crimes that you have committed over the years. If you dare to conceal any of your crimes, I'll rip off one of your arms. Mu Xingqiu harshly shuddered. He could barely keep a hold of the letter of confession in his trembling hands. Chapter 145, Disgracing Oneself 4. I, Mu Xingqiu, have committed many wrongs over the years, Mu Xingqiu spoke with a trembling voice. My most regretful mistake is being lustful and causing Junior General Yun and young Madam to lose their life on the battlefield. Even if I used my entire life, I would never be able to redeem myself from this sin. Mu Xingqiu's expression became more and more unsightly, the hand grasping the letter of confession also shook even more, his eyes full of despair. Second, when I was young, I had an affair with my sister-in-law and was accidentally discovered by my elder brother. To prevent this matter from being known, I poisoned my elder brother and claimed that he died from an illness to the public. Wow! The crowd went into an uproar. No matter what, the people would not have imagined that not only did Mu Xingqiu have an illicit affair with his sister-in-law but also plotted the death of his biological brother. Why didn't God take a bastard like this? It was truly as young Luo Feng said, nice people don't live long while bad people live for millenniums. Compared with Junior General Yun, who devoted himself to the country and people, this Mu Xingqiu was the one who was actually guilty of monstrous crimes. Third, because my parents were suspicious of the cause of my elder brother's death, I was afraid they wouldn't forgive me after finding out, so I struck first and killed them. To everyone else, I said that my parents could not handle my elder brother's death, so they hung themselves. The crowd was stunned by Mu Xingqiu's words yet again. They initially thought that Mu Xingqiu stealing his sister-in-law and murdering his brother were already cruel enough, but, unexpectedly, he even killed his own parents. Why would a person like this still be alive? God was truly blind. Following this, whenever Mu Xingqiu announced one of his crimes, the shock in everyone's heart deepened to another degree. Fratricide, parricide, stealing of sister-in-law, abduction of children, scorning of the law, there was not a single thing that Mu Xingqiu had not done. It could be said that every crime that someone could commit, he had committed them all, not a single one was left out. Mu Xingqiu's expression shifted from its original livid expression to a pale one. In the end, his face was drained of all colors, except for a pallid gray. Until he himself became numb, as though he was a machine and only knew to read from the letter of confession, not omitting a single word. After he reported more than 100 crimes one by one, the entire street at the city's entrance grew silent, so silent that even the sound of a breeze could be clearly heard. Mu Wuxuang, your turn now. Young Luo Feng turned to look at Mu Wuxuang with a bewitching smile on her lips. Are you planning to report your crimes yourself, or should I assist you? The help that she spoke of was, of course, brute force. If Mu Wuxuang was adamant about not admitting her crimes, she did not mind using brute force to make her concede. Mu Wuxuang's expression became ghastly white in an instant. She tightly bit her lips and silently looked at young Luo Feng. Mu Wuxuang, is it possible that Mu Wuxuang has also committed a sin? That can't be right. Mu Xingqiu has certainly done many evil deeds, but what does this have to do with her? Mu Wuxuang is graceful and kind, she couldn't have done wicked things. Cluck cluck, haven't you heard of a saying? One may know a person for a long time without understanding their true nature. Medical Pavilion has a great prestige on this continent, and since these matters were investigated by them, it can't be fake. Following Yun Luo Feng's words, the silent city entrance went into an uproar again. The people whispered into each other's ear while their eyes revealed their astonishment. Besides Mu Wuxuang, the old man and 3 little ones from Mu family were all terrible. Everyone knew that Mu Xingqiu was shameless and lecherous, leaking intelligence for women and dragging Junior General Yun and his wife down. The eldest young master of Mu family, Mu Wuchen, was cold, arrogant, vicious, and malicious, looking down on everyone. Second young master Mu Shen was a proper hedonistic son of the affluent, always bringing a crowd of people with him to cause trouble. Last time, he was even ruthlessly beaten up by the guards of the Yun household who were protecting young Luo Feng. Only Mu Wuxuang had a graceful and kind-hearted disposition, never committing any evil deeds. How could you make the people believe she would also have a letter of confession? Chapter 146, Mu Wuxuang's Crimes. At the clamorous city entrance, after everyone started discussing amongst themselves, Mu Wuxuang clenched the letter of confession in her hands, her lowered eyes flashing with an icy light. She will eventually pay Yun Luo Feng back for today's humiliation. Thinking this, Mu Wuxuang suppressed the fury in her heart and unfolded her letter of confession. I, Mu Wuxuang, have crimes that fill the heaven and have killed countless of people. Killed countless of people. Bang. Mu Wuxuang's words were akin to a sudden clap of thunder, ferociously shaking everyone's heart. They dumbfoundedly stared at the pale-faced Mu Wuxuang. In that instant, they actually suspected their ears had problems. Facing those astonished gazes, Mu Wushuang's head remained lowered, and the hand clasping the letter of confession started trembling slightly. Not only did I secretly send Crown Prince a message more than half a year ago and had him find a man to frame Yun Luo Feng for dallying with a beautiful man in the middle of the street, destroying Yun Luo Feng's reputation, but I also had a bunch of women from Longyuan Kingdom, who were pestering the Crown Prince, secretly killed, and then shifted the blame to someone else. Yun Luo Feng's reputation of having big boobs with no brain and being perverted and easily infatuated was spread by me. The point was to break Crown Prince and her engagement so that I could become Longyuan's Crown Prince consort. 10 years ago, I also had my master do nothing to save Yun Qingye from dying. Most importantly, I had a younger sister with the same father but different mother. One time, I accidentally discovered that she was infatuated with Crown Prince, so this sister of mine also died in my hands. Longyuan Kingdom's citizens remembered Prime Minister Estate had a second miss indeed. This second miss did not have Mu Wushuang's innate talent and intelligence and also did not have the status of a direct descendant, only mothered by a concubine, so not many people cared about her death. What was unexpected was that Prime Minister Estate's second miss died at the hands of Mu Wushuang. Everyone was stunned. If Mu Xingqiu's actions made them endlessly sigh, then Mu Wushuang's behavior threw them into disbelief. Everyone could not believe that Prime Minister Estate's eldest miss, who was graceful and dignified in front of everyone, was actually a person who killed her own sister. Yun Luo Feng faintly smiled, her eyes glancing at the crowd and surprisingly spotted a deathly pale face in the crowd. Inside the crowd, Mu Shen staggered back, his pale face was infuriated as he unwaveringly glared at Mu Wushuang. It turns out that Shui Ye was killed by her. For the Crown Prince, she killed my younger sister, Mu Rongxie. Hate gushed from Mu Shen's heart, a heaven-shattering fury burning in his heart. The current citizens of Longyuan seemed to have forgotten that Prime Minister Estate's second miss and Mu Shen were both the children of a concubine and born from the same mother. Hearing this explosive news now, how could he not have hate in his heart? The people beside him could even hear the sound of Mu Shen gritting his teeth. You killing your younger sister, does Mu Xingqiu know about this? Yun Luo Feng raised her lips in a faint smile and asked. Her bewitching look slowly swept across the ashen Mu Xingqiu. Mu Wushuang's face was also ghastly white and colorless. She glanced at Mu Xingqiu and gnashed her teeth before saying, "My grandfather, he knows. Mu Rongxie is a mere daughter of a concubine, I'm the daughter of the legal wife. Do you think my grandfather will favor a concubine's daughter?" Hearing Mu Wushuang's words, Yun Luo Feng slightly narrowed her eyes, her dark eyes flashing with a wicked light. You two deserve to be grandfather and granddaughter. One stole his sister-in-law and murdered his brother, the other, did not let off her own younger sister. As expected, beasts become a family. Chapter 147, Regretful Crown Prince 1. Mu Wushuang's psychological defense completely collapsed. She glared at Yun Luo Feng, and her elegant and demure face turned very grim at the moment. Yun Luo Feng, you will have to pay for what you did to me today. Yun Luo Feng smiled wickedly, and lazily leaned against the calm man behind her. She glanced at Mu Wushuang who was ghastly pale. Well, in this world, nobody is smart enough to scheme against me. I'll be waiting for you. As soon as she finished, her face turned solemn and she ordered with a sneer, Yun Xiao, tie them down and send them to my parents' graves. My grandpa has been waiting there for a long time. Very well. The cool man turned his eyes away from the beautiful girl and looked at Mu Xingqiu and Mu Wushuang expressionlessly, his deep dark eyes showing a ruthless murderous desire. Stop it, what are you going to do? I am a minister of the royal court, and you are just a small guard, you. Mu Xingqiu was stunned by the imposing manner of the man. He felt that the man didn't only want to tie him down but also wanted to kill him. With a fear in his heart, he couldn't help stepping back. However, before he got the time to turn and run away, he was grabbed by the man and held up like a chicken. His face was white with fear. Let's go. Yun Luo Feng looked at the two held in the man's hands, yawned lazily and turned toward the gate. When the figures of these people disappeared, boisterous discussion sounds rang from the crowd at the gate again. It is true that you may know a person's face but not his mind. I really did not expect the graceful and dignified Miss Mu as such a person. Her sister was just infatuated with Crown Prince and has never thought of marrying him, but she just killed her. Didn't you listen to her? She framed Yun Luo Feng and made the people believe Yun Luo Feng molested a handsome man on the street. Gee, I really did not expect that Mu Wushwang is such a person. I think Crown Prince won't want her to be his wife anymore after people get to know what she has done. Exactly, a scheming BTCH like Mu Wushwang doesn't deserve to be our future queen. Outside the city. Surrounded by pine trees, two tombs quietly stood on the top of a mountain. On top of the tombs, the epitaphs inscribed with cinnabar were so conspicuous as if they were painted with blood. The white-haired old man grovelled on the ground, his trembling fingers gently stroking the characters on the gravestone, a deep pain revealed in his eyes. Junior General Yun Yang was young, talented and outstanding. What a lamentable thing he was killed on the battlefield. His wife, Bai Ling, was a valiant and an excellent woman. She fought bravely for the country together with her husband. The couple was killed on the battlefield and was buried here. Fenger, your parents' last wish was to be buried here together, far away from the hubbub of the world and free from any disturbance of the earthly world. Now they have their wish fulfilled. In the woods, no one can disturb them. Yun Luo slightly closed his eyes. Even now, he could still recall the heart-wrenching pains he felt when he heard the news that Yun Yang and his wife died on the battlefield more than a decade ago. The pain in his heart had not yet subsided, and he had to go to the battlefield for his son, to defend the country and his people. However, in the end, what did he get? He could not avenge his eldest son and daughter-in-law, and even his younger son was framed and had to hide in a secret chamber and couldn't see the sun. And he himself, after leaving behind his granddaughter and guarding the border for 10 years, was no match for the pillow wind blown by noble consort Mu to the emperor. Chapter 148. Regretful Crown Prince 2. Such a concupiscent tyrant was not worthy of his loyalty. Young Luo Feng walked slowly to the tombstones, looking straight at the inscriptions on the tombstones as if she was looking at the respected couple on the battlefield. Dad, Mom, I've come to see you. She was not the real Yun Luo Feng and was just trying to survive with this body. However, after having been merged with the body, she gradually felt similarly to the real owner of this body. You can rest assured, I will avenge you sooner or later. Be it the Prime Minister, the fatuous Emperor, or those who really killed you, I will make them pay for what they've done to you. Listening to the girl's words, the old man showed a gratified smile. However, when he turned to Mu Xingqiu who had been taken to the graves, his old face suddenly fell. Mu Xingqiu, you old thief, it serves you just right, ha ha ha. Yun Luo laughed. Though his smile was bright, his eyes were grim. Now kneel down. You. Mu Xingqiu got quite furious and was about to rebut the old man. Bang! At this moment, someone kicked hard at the back of his knee. Caught off guard, he knelt down on the ground heavily. Shame. This was a great humiliation. Mu Xingqiu's head was pressed to the ground. He clenched his fist, his eyes full of shame and anger. He had never been humiliated like this since he gained power. He would bear in mind what they had done to him today. One day, he would make all the men of the general estate kneel before him and beg for his mercy. Yanger, Linger, have you seen this in heaven? Yun Luo looked up at the sky and shouted out loud, during that year, the son of ABTCH leaked information and had you killed. But the emperor forgot your contribution and chose to take sides with him. Now I'll make them kneel down and kowtow to your graves for 1,000 times. Hope that your souls can rest in peace. While speaking, tears were running down from the old man's face. How many years had it been? For how many years had been waiting for this day? And he would never forget that when he went to His Majesty to report what they had done back then, His Majesty just said lightly. Now that things have happened, an investigation will be a waste of time. What's more, Mr. Mu didn't do it deliberately. How about this? Let him apologize to you. As you know, it's impossible for the dead to come back to life. Please contain your grief. Apologize. This man murdered his son and daughter-in-law and just got away with a simple apology. Therefore, due to rage, he summoned all the soldiers from the border and trod down the estate of Mu Xingqiu. Since then, he no longer wanted to get involved in wars of the country. However, hearing that people living on the border were in an abyss of suffering, he couldn't ignore it but chose to lead the soldiers to the battlefield. Grandpa. Seeing that the old man seemed to be unable to control his emotions, Yun Luo Feng quickly came to him and supported him with her hands. She frowned slightly. It's getting late, and I must take you back to have a rest. So I'll have Yun Xiao supervise them to complete kowtowing 1,000 times. Good. Yun Luo closed his eyes. Even though he had waited a long time for this scene, he still felt like there was a huge rock in his heart, and he couldn't breathe. If he could, he wished he had never been a general, so that Yunyang and his wife would not die on the battlefield. After walking out of the pine forest, young Luo Feng slowly stopped. With her dark eyes looking at the old man beside her, she asked, "Grandpa, do you blame me for not killing Mu Xingqiu?" Chapter 149, Regretful Crown Prince 3. Young Luo slightly shook his head and sighed. "I know there must be a reason why you didn't kill them. Grandpa won't ask." He was never worried about the girl no matter what she did. "Grandpa, have you ever wondered why the Dog Emperor is so partial to Mu clan?" Young Luo Feng stroked her chin, pondering. Prime Minister Mu leaked military intelligence and had my parents killed in the battlefield. Normally, the behavior of Prime Minister Mu would be a crime of treason. Even if the Dog Emperor loves Nobel consort Mu very much, he couldn't shield him justifiably. Young Luo paused for a moment and looked at young Luo Feng in astonishment, his eyes full of doubt. "I haven't really thought about it. Indeed, Mu Xingqiu was accused of treason, but the emperor didn't punish Prime Minister Mu. Instead, he chose to shield him as much as he could. Was it just because the emperor loved noble consort very much?" Young Luo Feng smiled wickedly. "What's more, I helped Lin Gongong recover his masculinity. Normally, an emperor would rather choose to believe my strength than claim that Lin Gongong escaped castration. In the harem, what does a man who has not been castrated represent? This stands for being cuckolded. Would he be foolish enough to let himself wear a green hat? A man who had not been castrated stayed in the harem as a eunuch, and everybody knew what it meant. Therefore, even if Gao Tu did not believe in her ability, he would have chosen to believe it at that time. However, to shield Mu Wuxuang, he would rather wear a green hat." Young Luo Feng had to give this matter some thought. "Fenger, just as you said, this is really strange." Young Luo kept silent for a while and then he said, "Gao Tu has been too partial to Mu clan. I think there must be a reason for it. So we should not kill Mu Xingqiu, the dog thief, for now." Young Luo Feng's eyes revealed a killing intent. "However, I hereby swear, someday I'll appease my parents' souls with Mu Xingqiu's head, and I will overthrow Gao Tu's reign who has been unreasonably partial to the Mu clan." "Good." Young Luo laughed and patted young Luo Feng on the shoulder. "Just as expected of a good scion of our family. As a member of the Yun clan, one must have confidence and aspiration. I'm sure you will be very successful in the future." Looking at the old man's relaxed face, young Luo Feng cracked a wicked smile. In a few days, Red Hackberry Tree would bear spiritual fruits, and then she would give the old fellow a surprise. The next day, in the backyard of the Yun clan, a young girl was lying lazily on a chaise longue. She held a grape in her hand, carefully removed the seeds from the grape and put the translucent grape into her mouth. "I wonder what will happen if I plant these fruit trees in the God Code world." Young Luo Feng slightly raised the corners of her mouth, revealing a wicked but charming smile. Of course, she just thought about it. However, as she was thinking about it, a cute voice came from within her soul. "I'll tell you that fruit trees can also be planted in the God Code world if you can make Yun Xiao your boyfriend." Xiao Mo's voice was a little bit angry. It had been more than half a year, but Master had not made any progress. He was terribly worried about her. "Oh," young Luo Feng slightly raised her eyebrows. "But you have told me now. What should I do then?" Chapter 150, Regretful Crown Prince 4. There was a moment of silence in her soul, followed by a sudden cry, which shook her soul. "Boo-hoo, Master, I'll never talk to you again, you big villain." After crying for a while, the adorable little guy cut off his contact with young Luo Feng and ignored her. However, in her own mind, young Luo Feng could see the little fellow squatting in a corner and drawing circles, his cute face full of grievance. Just as young Luo Feng was about to comfort him, a familiar figure caught her eyes. She slightly raised the corners of her lips. "Yun Xiao, have you finished the task yet?" The man nodded coldly. "They've kowtowed for 1,000 times, no more, no less." Even kowtowing for 100 times would make one break his head and bleed. Thus, she could imagine how terrible Mu Xingqiu would look now. He might need to take a long rest after this. "Miss." Suddenly, a servant girl rushed in. "Crown Prince comes to visit you." "Crown Prince?" Young Luo Feng raised her eyebrows. "Let him in." "Yes, miss." After reporting to her, the servant girl hurried to go out. Before long, a handsome young man in a blue robe showed up before her. The young man looked pale and tired, and a complicated look appeared in his sharp dark eyes as he looked at young Luo Feng, who was lying on a chaise longue. Young Luo Feng, did you do it deliberately? Gao Ling clenched his fist. Upon meeting young Luo Feng, his first sentence was not to ask her to treat him, nor ask for her forgiveness, but rather to question her. Yes, I did it on purpose. So what? So what? The girl sounded arrogant and domineering, as though she was not taking the lover that all the young ladies of Longyuan Kingdom were yearning for seriously. You. Gao Ling's handsome face turned ghastly pale and he said angrily, you made me swear that I would never bother you that day by Qin River because you knew I would regret it later, right? This woman definitely did it on purpose. She deliberately tricked him to say such words, so that he couldn't be entangled with her in the future. Young Luo Feng glanced at Gao Ling's regretful face, raised the corners of her lips and said, I think I was quite perceptive back then. Gao Ling felt his heart suddenly missed a beat. Yes, young Luo Feng was still a trash who was unable to cultivate. However, by virtue of her medical skill, she was qualified to be his crown princess. But he let her go just like this. What's more, even Elder Rong of the medical pavilion admired her as a capable doctor. So, Gao Ling was really regretting it now. Young Luo Feng, Gao Ling approached young Luo Feng and said condescendingly, you've been in love with me for so many years. It's impossible for you to forget your love from me so easily. I know you still have me in your heart. You just don't want to admit it. Never mind, this prince will fulfill my original promise and marry you. Young Luo Feng laughed. Then how about Mu Wuxuang? Gao Ling paused. After pondering for quite a while, he said, I will marry both of you at the same time. Both of you are of equal status. Are you satisfied? You want to marry two wives at the same time? That's a good idea. Young Luo Feng sneered, both her words and her face full of contempt. Unfortunately, I'll never ever share a man with others. My man can only have me as his woman. If he dares to touch any other woman, I will kill both him and that woman.